Welcome to the Lancaster County Democrats Watchful Citizens Show. My name is Barbara Baier, and today's guest is Susan Scott. And Susan Scott is the recent former director of the YWCA, which is located downtown. And Susan Scott is also a Democratic candidate for Legislative District 29 for state senator. We're so happy to have you here, Susan.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here as well as being excited to run. I know one of the things that people often are wondering about is where is District 29, and it happens to fall between 27th and 56th Street, south of South Street. However, right at Sheridan Boulevard, the west side of Sheridan goes over to 27th, and the east side until you hit the bike path, and so it's kind of gerrymandered a little bit, but it's a lovely part of town. I've lived there for 30 years. I've owned my own home in the district for 25, so I'm a long-term resident of District 29.
Well, that's terrific. Well, tell us, what are some of the issues and priorities you feel are facing your district?
Well, I'm not sure so much that there are specific things that apply to our district as much as all of the issues that apply to Nebraskans, because there are just those bread and butter issues, health care, education, jobs, taxes, that everybody is concerned about. And I think those, resonate with the constituents of District 29 as well.
Well, that's really good. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you as the YWCA director, but I don't know where you're from or anything like that.
Sure. Well, I've actually lived in Nebraska since 1973, but I grew up in Brookings, South Dakota,
really?
to Clem and Dolores Quas, a good German family, and I was a Susie Q. My dad wanted a Susie Q.
Yeah.
And pretty Democratic family. In the 5th grade, I remember having a debate right before the Kennedy-Nixon debate in geography class, and the next day, of course, I was elated. And 20 years later, I went to a class reunion, and the man that I debated said, "Susie, you were right." So that made me really happy. But I followed a spouse around for a number of years and had kind of a checkered past. The first probably 7 years of my job, I worked in education. I'd graduated from Creighton with a bachelor's in English and secondary ed, and then went back to Brookings and became a house mother and got a master's in guidance and counseling. And so I worked in education, taught, worked in mental retardation, administered mental health, alcoholism programs, and finally, about 25 years ago, became a management training consultant. And I did that for about 17 years and did the human side of productivity. So worked for lots of different businesses throughout the United States, did some consulting in Canada, Hawaii, actually even in Brazil. And so that was a fun opportunity. And then when the job came open at the YWCA, I was just so committed because of the work I'd done as a commissioner on the status of women and a participant in CARD, which is Citizens Against Racism and Discrimination, that the mission of the YW, which is to empower women and girls and to eliminate racism, resonated so strongly that I thought that would be a fun job to do. And so I've just finished 7 years there. And so now I decided I needed another challenge and thought that running for the legislature would be a good thing.
Well, that's great. We're really happy to have you do that. And it seems like you bring a powerful resume to some of the issues that are now facing Nebraskans. One of the issues that I think is really critical is the state of our social services. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the problems that we have, and it's a general statement not only about social services, but really everything. Everybody has a vested interest in what they want to have, and yet nobody wants their taxes to be raised or to lose the priorities that they have. And social services is one of the things that I think has had a huge impact because of the federal government. I don't think in the last 8 years that people have been interested in investing, and actually we had a program that was wonderful for pregnant and parenting teens, and right now if you're a pregnant and parenting teen, say you're 17 years old and you have a child, you cannot actually get any assistance and be studying for your GED. You either have to be getting a job or pregnant. And it just seems to not make very much sense, because here I'm looking at these 17-year-old children having children, and And as the result of not having a GED and maybe having a third grade reading level, what kind of a job are you going to have? What kind of a parent are you going to be having? And so there are all of these issues that are going on, and there just doesn't seem to be as much support perhaps for families and mothers as we'd like, but it's also how are we going to pay for it?
Mm-hmm. So do you believe that as we look at the need to support families in Nebraska, that early childhood education is important?
Oh, early childhood education is so important, and I guess I look at all of these programs as kind of an investment. A lot of people say, oh, there's a cost, but if we don't do it, who's going to end up in prison? Who's going to end up, having not a good family? And I think it all starts with early childhood education, but at the same time, the state of Nebraska several years ago cut or raised the requirement that you could only make $7 an hour and get help with child care.
Oh, really?
So someone that's
Wow.
making, just a little over $14,000 a year can't get any subsidy on their child care. Well, if you're making $14,000 and you want quality child care, which would be licensed from my point of view, and accredited, it isn't going to cost you any less than $5,000 a year. Well, if you're making $14,000 and you have to pay $5,000 out for child care, quality child care, how in the world are you going to make it on the rest of that income, $9,000 for everything else? So that's the really sad part, is how do we cover all of these costs, and how do we help people have the services that they need and assure the quality?